Oh boy. Hello everybody. Welcome back. My brain was numb today until I got a dose of that high quality, not sponsored Rockstar Energy, and now my brain is firing again. Hello. If you are new with us here this fine evening, in the middle of December, my name is Emmerron. I do content creation stuff. I am a professional GM. I am far too deep in the sauce where Cyberpunk Red is concerned, and have every book of the game that we have so far for Cyberpunk Red, and I believe technically digitally I've got them for 2020 as well. And of course, joining me as always is my co-host.
Hello everybody, as always, here every week, no matter what. I am Diamond Dust. I am a little tired from another successful campaign and just other things going on. But that being said, as always, voice for the people, I'm here for you. Welcome to Wireheads.
We back. So it's been another week. This week has been, I mean, for you, it's been a fairly eventful week, Diamond. For me, not much has happened on my side of the globe where things are considered, or I suppose on my side of the house. But ultimately, pre-production stuff for Neon Inferno Season 3 is coming. If those of you who are not here last week, if you have not seen the trailer teaser thing that I put together and presented at the end of last week's episode, you can find that on its own on my YouTube channel. It also is in the upload we did for last week's podcast, so you may have seen it there as well if you watched that episode. But Diamond, I know, like you just said, you wrapped fully this time. Because I know last week was like you were pushing to wrap Red Genesis and be done with that. Not that was something you're like, oh god, I need this to be over. But I know, as well as I know you definitely understand this more acutely than I do right now. It's a lot. It's work. So it's always a bit of a relief.
Finals week is coming, and I wanted to make sure we got it done before, for Chibi's sake. But also, I did kind of subtly announce over my server that I'll have a little short story coming up where, I might do some auditions out for what looks like the people want is a mercenary story. Now, hopefully, maybe, somehow, we get another release at some point in the near future, maybe before this happens. But either way, if it's gonna be a mercenary story, these guys get to have that deal with the devil, get a little extra play money, and then I don't know if it'll be quite like Mike Pondsmith kills your Cyberpunk character, but I will try.
But yeah, not holding back. No, I definitely I know how that works. That's the only other thing I'm working on, like I'm deep in production on right now, is a sinking feeling. And that is built to try. It's built to try and be lethal. Not that it will kill you, but it has a better than the average adventure's chance to potentially kill you. So it's fun.
It nearly killed me, so I mean,
you survived. 1 HP is still living.
That has the same kind of tone as like when Vulpus Vox is like to the rest of the party. But did you die?
Yeah, I mean that truly is the way I look at games like that, or like adventures like that. That's like if you lived, you did it. You succeeded. You won. It's another thing too that like when you come through those things, I think if you get to see the other end of it, you've done everything as right as you could, because like there's a lot of ways to die. Like there's that beautiful little song that I discovered far too long after the fact was actually like a anti-drunk driving ad, the dumb ways to die. That song is perfectly encapsulating. There's a lot of dumb ways you can die in sinking feeling, to say nothing of the really smart ways that you could die. There's a lot of ways to kill yourself in that if you're not careful. But that said, I will not spoil anything other than to suggest that yes, there's a lot of ways that things can go very wrong in that adventure if you're not careful. However, let's talk about exactly what I really deeply, soul-searchingly decided about 10 minutes before we went live I want to talk about today.
I mean, it was a very genuine thought that got us here, that we have some ideas for what we want to talk about down the road as well from it.
Yeah. Oh, and Null, yeah. Pyrrhic Victory is so good that it's the garlic parmesan I lick off my fingers at the end of a Cyberpunk game. Me too.
Yeah.
Like, that's, yeah. Pyrrhic Victory is one of my favorite things to leave a Cyberpunk game with.
But at what cost?
If you feel that aching emptiness at the end of the session where your party technically won, you've done something very right as the GM. That's all I'm saying. So this is actually not a bad way to lead into the topic. So the topic, those of you who have looked at the topic box so far and not just listened to the sound of my voice, will have seen it says why CPR Cyberpunk Red, that's the abbreviation we use for it, is different. So that is not a question, it is a statement. And we're going to get into where this was born from and kind of why I want to talk about this 61 episodes into the podcast. And this isn't a first episode high level overview like what we actually did for that episode.
What is Cyberpunk?
What is Cyberpunk, right? So like defining the game is step one of this discussion. So for those of you who have joined us far later into this and have not listened to our backlog of episodes, for one, I see you. Very valid. Completely understand.
Pick and choose.
I would need to do the hard math on how many hours 61 episodes of this podcast are, knowing each is roughly 2.5 hours. Plus the half episodes where we just had like pre-recorded interviews with a couple of people that we couldn't get here live on the podcast. So like valid as hell. However, I would encourage you, if you have not seen our very first episode in this series, to go all the way back and to listen to that, because that's going to help prime you for the discussion that we're going to have here.
We're at about 160.5 hours.
Jesus Christ. Okay, yeah. So again, very, very, very valid. 160 hours is like not a small number of hours. That is, yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of time. So again, don't expect everyone here.
It's just 6 days.
Yeah, and without sleeping. Yeah, that is just 6 days. You'll be hallucinating half the episodes by the time you're done. So with that,
some of the episodes were a hallucination though.
To be fair, this one is shaping that direction already. So that said, if you are here with us live, stick around, because I think most of our audience at this point are fairly familiar with the system. You are fairly familiar with the world, and kind of how it is shaped, the way that certain systems operate. So you're going to be able to approach this fine without me like giving all of that previously given context a second time. So now that the preamble is out of the way, let's talk about what I mean by the statement why Cyberpunk Red is different. So this came from a discussion that myself and Phantom, who some of you will know, real name is Evan. He, myself, and his brother Connor, who has played in Neon Inferno before, we were at a we do a I forget what the I think it's bi-weekly is when you do it every other week. We have a every other week group that we're part of where we go and we discuss our lives and philosophy and all of that sort of stuff, and then we usually hang out after to just spend some time together because we're all friends there. So it's Evan and his two brothers and me, my brother, and then a couple of our other mutual friends that are part of this little men's group that we have going. And so and hello Southern Canuck, welcome. We had this discussion though about Evan has admittedly he's the kind of guy who reads very deeply about like the metatextual things like philosophy of RPGs that I have spent admittedly far less time really studying. I am the kind of guy who like really deep dives the systems that I enjoy and like get to know them incredibly intimately, and then take the metatextual stuff out later when it matters. And so we were having this discussion about and this is something I was trying to feverishly look for, and we'll probably cover on a later episode of the podcast in the future. And I'm gonna skip this Dungeon Soup theme. I maybe need to hide that one on this playlist. Let me just do that because that's a little much. We were discussing there are 6, and I was trying to find this before our podcasting, could not find it. Guy Sklanders Once Upon a Time did and Evan was telling me Seth Skorkowski's covered it. So between those two guys, who are both very, very knowledgeable cornerstones of the TTRPG space, there has been a philosophical discussion about within TTRPGs, there are several different like meta genres that your TTRPG can fit into. And without going into the weeds on that, Evan's thesis that he gave me during this discussion was that Cyberpunk Red does not neatly fit into any of them. Like, it adopts facets of many of them, but it does not neatly fit into any one of them as like a primary thing. And so while I don't have the scholarly understanding that Evan did during our discussion the other night, it did lead me to thinking about both the way that I've run Cyberpunk and the way that I have appreciated and approached the game. And as I've become more familiar with other systems and how they go about doing the things that they do, I've learned to always come back to Cyberpunk Red as probably my favorite system of them all. I will say lately Daggerheart has been really trying. I would say that those two systems together probably make the bulk of like the stuff I'm doing right now outside of content creation. Just because both do certain things very right, and they're the elements that I most appreciate when I sit down and play an RPG. So let's start with why I think Cyberpunk Red is kind of in a league of its own, though. Because as much as there are other systems that kind of emulate parts of it and what I think are good about it, it stands alone as really doing all of them well together. Because there have been, to my experience at least, no other RPGs that really do what Cyberpunk Red does. So I will start by saying, or rather by asking, Diamond, when you first came to Cyberpunk Red and like really like glued onto the system and understood it and then like really grew to love it, what was the first thing that drew you in, that made you love it when you started like looking at it through a game master's eyes specifically?
For me, when it comes to Cyberpunk Red, as I am someone that played, a lot of Pathfinder and Dungeons and Dragons 3.5 and a splash of 5e before coming into before kind of just going into a break of just like no games for a while. Cyberpunk Red, it's while it is still set in a world, a timeline, a setting of its own, it's grounded in a realism that can be understood with just a little further thought and imagination. Also on top of that, things are very actions you take in Cyberpunk have very permanent consequences. It can't just be magicked away. It can't just be, miracled away. You can't just, you can't just scrub it in that case. And also, the stakes are so much higher in Cyberpunk, I feel. Because, as adventurers in Pathfinder or D&D, you'll always have just, a little extra gold in your pocket, enough food. You even have spells to make sure that you survive between towns or whatever. You have healing spells. You can be dead. Your cleric slaps you, and then you get up at 2 HP, fully functional. You aren't taking penalties. You're fine. And I say this specifically towards a very specific Dungeons and Dragons. Because I think 4th edition had like injury penalties as well, and 3.5 did have had like more specific injury penalties.
I need
if you were harmed.
I would need to go back and reread 4th edition's rules. I believe we still had exhaustion mechanics and things like that. I just know I was really bad at implementing them when I was running my game. Because again, that was like, I was the most novice of game masters at the time still. Yeah. So like, I was figuring it out, but I'm pretty sure those rules did exist in there. I just was dog shit at implementing them.
But yeah, like, you can't just magic something away. You can't just, heroic power something away. It is literally you playing as a human. Yes. Especially to those that are very much humans in my tabletop game. Yes, he plays a human in this game. We have to have something to base everything else off of. We have to have a template. That was a very bold thing to say, knowing we have elf lines online. But also, you can go above stat of 8. You can go above stat of 8 in elf lines.
The other reality is that technically you don't have to be a fully fledged human by definition. But your capabilities are going to be roughly human until you find ways to like blast out the limiters on that by either going FBC or at the very least it's like installing Chrome. I mean, exotics are the kind of the middle ground there where like you can enhance some things and still remain mostly human in others.
There is a permanent cost for everything.
Yeah.
Your humanity.
Yep.
Possible, you lose valuable items. You lose important people. There is an exchange for everything. I like stakes.
Yeah. So to probably like summarize all of that, you like the fact that there are consequences in scarcity and that like the interplay of those are very okay. That is entirely valid because that's
I love good risk.
Yeah.
In my games.
Yep. No, and I'm with you on that. And so like I think because what drew me more than any other thing were the consequences. I actually didn't have as good a hold on the scarcity mechanics. And I think a lot of people, especially those of us who came in before some of the rules clarity was there from books like Black Chrome, we came into the core rulebook, we read it, and kind of bounced off understanding the economy. And then we got the Economics 101 chapter in Black Chrome, which like the really shocking thing to me about just about every hardbound Cyberpunk supplement we've gotten save Tales of the Red, because that doesn't quite qualify for what I'm about to describe, is that there is a like maybe 10-page section in each of Black Chrome and Danger Gal Dossier that fundamentally restructures how I have thought about Cyberpunk Red as a GM, and has like really clarified it in a way that was like important and necessary. But coming at just the core rulebook and the Jumpstart kit, which is really where I started, I think my favorite thing about Cyberpunk is how cinematic every moment of the game feels, and how earned the victories are, and how like bitter they can taste. Like we were just talking, in the intro there, and Null brought up Pyrrhic Victory being like one of his favorite things about the system. That I'd say probably more than anything else, because as the GM who taught me the game, Phantom was really, really, really good at like highlighting Pyrrhic Victory in just about everything we did. Like whatever choice we made, there was a trade-off. And for us, it was never about complete dominance over our objectives. It was picking the trade-off that sucked the least and kept our asses fed, housed, and alive. And trying to marry up the good enough ending that we could get against all those other things. And just that constant gameplay loop that encourages that, I have found in almost no other games, without there being like a significant amount of work done by the game master to ensure that emotion and that feeling is there. Because there are games that are about as lethal as Cyberpunk Red. Certainly there are ones that are even more lethal than Cyberpunk would be, but the ones that are about as lethal, I would put like Dragonbane in that camp. I would put probably like loosely, I could throw Fabula Ultima in that camp, although it's a little different. But like in terms of
Blade Runner,
Blade Runner is more lethal than Red, I would say.
Fair, yeah. You can't insta-die.
You can insta-die without losing all your health, and that immediately sends it to a different kind of place. So yeah, I would say like Red is kind of struck this beautiful balance between lethality and mechanical salvation, I guess would be the best way I could put it for your character, where by playing smart and playing well, you increase the odds you'll survive the encounter. And there are enough consequences on the opposite side of that coin, where if you don't play smart and don't do the right thing, quote unquote, you will end up dead by the end of an encounter. And there's like a real weight to making sure you're doing the smart thing nearly all the time. And so this is, I guess, where we can start that discussion of like why I think Cyberpunk Red does something so unique. So I actually want to read chat real quick right before I dive in. So death is very real, especially in 2013, 2020. So this is all coming from Burning Hot Red. So when I played 2020, I love how tough you gotta be to win. My crew fought hard to complete Firestorm. What Red did, I'll admit, made the stories much more impactful. Like my players aren't flimsy, but there is painful consequences like the Red Knight duo. Yes. The Red Knight storyline, without spoiling anything, is like incredibly impactful. The Reaper's storyline is also incredibly impactful, especially if you as a GM know how to read in. So this is actually a great way where we can start this. There are other games, like Daggerheart does a version of this. I know D&D 5th edition tried-ish to kind of do a version of this, but I would argue D&D's is very, like, I remember the first time I read D&D 5th edition's backgrounds and like some of like I forget quite what they call them, but like the origin benefits where you're like, you're a soldier or you're a merchant or whatever. And like you got some of your starting gear and starting aptitude stuff based upon which of those backgrounds you were. But because of how everything D&D tries to be, none of those things felt dense enough to really hang my hat on. And as a GM, it didn't really ever feel like there was enough substance there for me to really dig in and like get something good for my player to feel more immersed in the world. This is a common complaint my wife has made when trying to play other RPGs, is that when you play a game more like D&D, where there is like no firm substance of what is this world, and like define it really nicely in terms of like what are you capable of doing, what is considered socially acceptable, what is considered taboo, it gets to be really difficult because you're role playing without a guide almost, especially as like a player. If you're trying to like live as a person in that world, it's really hard to know without getting a full like treatise on like, this is what the world you are walking into is, right? Like if you don't have a document that you can just look at as a player and say, ah, yes, A, B, C, D, E, this is the expectations of my character and their like social behavior and like the things I should do when I'm talking with other people, the things I shouldn't do when I'm talking with other people, like all of that stuff that like we just kind of take for granted in our lived reality. And even within like the real world, you know, you if you go in with an assumption that like, hey, I'm American, I'm visiting like Japan, is like probably one of the cleanest examples I can give of this because I've actually been there. If you go there expecting them to have the same values you do and to like treat social scenarios the same way that you do, there's a lot you're going to like really have to grapple with when inevitably they come back and are like, why are you holding hands in public? Like, that's really weird. Why are you kissing? Like, for God forbid you kiss in public. Like, that's really like, what are you doing? You know, if you're eating your food while walking, like, what are you doing? Like, there's this neat little bench right next to the, even like the corner stands where you buy your food from like a window, and like they've got a little set up thing just next to it where you can eat that food, and that's where you eat that food. You don't take it with you and start walking. And like none of this is going to get you in trouble in Japan, but it is like you'll get the weird looks, right? Like it'll be like, you're the filthy foreigner kind of perspective of it, right? And that's kind of how it feels role playing in a game where you don't have this like really firm understanding of like, this is what the world's supposed to be, this is what the rules are going to be in terms of like social interaction. Like here's how like things like magic that we have no regard for within our society because it doesn't exist in reality is like a whole different thing where you're like, okay, how does this fantasy society regard magic and its users and practitioners and all of that stuff? And that can have a wide array of like different reasons or consequences for being treated different ways. And so I feel like Red, more than anything else, through its life path system, starts you on the right foot because it gets you really thinking about the world. And when you go through that, it's almost this like mini primer to the world. Because like if you roll, oh, you know, worked with a reclaimer pack, or like your parents were reclaimers. Well, now you have to look up like, what is a reclaimer? And it's in the rule book. You can just go look what a reclaimer is. And then it starts painting a picture for you. And sure, that picture may not be entirely accurate to like the deepest recesses of this setting, but for a new group of players and a first-time GM, it's going to paint a vivid enough picture that none of you are going to feel completely out of the loop and lacking of the understanding of like what the world is supposed to look like, how it's supposed to work, etc. And so I think when you take the life path, first of all, it gives a lot for the GM to work with. It's got a lot of ways that if the GM wants to punch you in the gut emotionally, they have like the codex on how to do that on your character sheet just by using the life path. We've talked about that plenty before, and there's not a lot of other systems I know that have anything close to it. Even games that do have something that conveys a similar weight, I still, even things like Daggerheart that I truly do love in the way they kind of approach that problem, it is such a different way of approaching it that, like, for Daggerheart, it's more focused on why are you a group? Like, why are you all adventurers together? What has set you individually on the path, and then what has made you part of the group of people that you're now a part of? And that is still really good. Like, that is substantive. That is deeper than a lot of the RPGs I've played take it to. Because I don't know, Diamond, like, have you encountered many other RPGs that feature systems akin to Life Path that, like, give you those, like, really substantive things to, like, kind of grab onto and work with?
They're like, and you know, here I am. I'm like, it is way out in the weeds. It was very much a latter thing that Paizo had added to Pathfinder First Edition, where it talked a little bit more about party relationships, and this was definitely something that it should have been added on initial creation. Like, it's like, why is this out? You know, I don't know. I was not like, I was way too young to be playing Pathfinder 1E when 1E came out.
Yeah.
It was more one of those things of, I stumbled across this, I looked at, like, when this stuff came out. Like, this stuff, like, should have been, like, in the core rulebook, or this stuff could have been a supplement. But really, when it comes to life path systems, Red's life path system, I like how it gives, and I think Red even mentioned it, because I was following chat. Compared to 2020's life paths, which had bonuses, I feel Red's I feel gives flexibility. Which, you're right. Like, Red's life path system has, like, these umbrella terms that allows you to define your character more specifically through that, without having to know all the specific lore of the world. But it does give you enough of a grasp of the world at the same time.
Yeah.
Such as, you know, a reclaimer. Like, you don't need to know what specific reclaimer town you're from, but you definitely are one of those salt of the earth folks. You grew up in a, you know, small town that was outside the city, or in one of the settlements inside the city. But really, I haven't seen anything, even like in the matter of Daggerhearts, like, you know, the way the party relationship is. I don't really see that in a lot of other games. I see them talking about what about you specifically. The only one, and it's more because I haven't played it, but because I've been reading through it, is Thirsty Sword Lesbians of all games. But because part of that game's core functions is talking about your interpersonal relationship with your party and with your connections, strings. Yep.
And to everyone in chat, because, like, I see both Eraser and Red talking about the fact that 2020's had bonuses. I know Witcher has also got that, and I honestly kind of I'm okay with Red's not having the mechanical interplay. And I can see both of you guys kind of are at the same conclusion of, like, the fact that it could interplay with things is cool. I just feel like what Red did with the shift, and why I think all of us agree that this is, like, a good change, is because now it's on the GM to better define, like, why is that important, rather than it just being a straight up, like, +1 to a skill, or, like, taking, in the worst case, like, penalties to skills and stuff like that. To me, that always feels a little rough, because you might have this really thorough idea of, like, what your character is going to be, and then a life path comes in and just, like, messes horrendously with the direction you wanted to take the character, and you fall into this really weird liminal space between, I don't want to look like I am min-maxing by saying, I don't like this, please let me change it, to the GM, but also understanding that like if you went ahead and just played the characters you rolled it, you would not be having a great time because it would just not be the character you envisioned. And like that, I think Red did a really good job of cleaning that side of the game up in a pretty meaningful way. Yeah, bonuses cause meta builds, and meta builds suck. This is where like it was teased before I actually met the guy that James Hutt, being the lead designer of Cyberpunk Red, is probably one of the best things that could have happened to it, because James is a power gamer. James thinks about games in the context of like,
how can I break it? Dominant
game theory. Yeah, like how do you break whatever system exists in the game to do X, Y, or Z? And then like boil that down as deeply as you can go and like find that answer, come out the other side of it, and like just do that. He is like great at thinking that way. And as such, most of the systems in Cyberpunk Red, we found a couple, like as the game has layered itself deeper and deeper, and this is usually where the problems begin to bubble up anyway, when you start layering so many new systems and new bits of cyberware, new pieces of like gear, and even some like new skills, like we saw with like the martial arts expansion in the last interface Red. There's a lot of stuff that starts to lock up weird and do more than maybe it was originally intended they would do. And like those edge cases notwithstanding, James done a pretty great job, I think, of like avoiding the problem. I mean,
every game is going to have like, and like when I've talked with James, there is always going to be edge cases. There has to be an edge for everything.
Right. And that's really what I'm saying is like, if all you have in your game are edge cases where things get out of hand, then like you've honestly designed a pretty incredible game, especially if like it's kind of crazy. We just passed the 5-year anniversary yesterday of Cyberpunk 2077.
Yeah.
And Red's core rulebook came out about a month earlier.
Yeah, November 14th.
So we've had
Red.
So we've had the proper system for Red for about 5 years. And to say that the only thing that's been broken about it are like some edge case stuff, when you get to like the core of the rules and like really dig around in them, like obviously there are other lessons that have been learned in that time that this episode really isn't talking about. But the core of the rules and the way that they interact with each other and the way that that has been like maintained and cultivated over the last 5 years is really impressive, I think, in a lot of ways. That like we can have monthly updates to the rules. We can have supplemental releases like Black Chrome and Danger Gal and the Tales of the Red books and like single player mode and like all these other like books that we've received over time that are providing rules updates to the system. And none of them have as of yet truly broken the system in any meaningful way. That's incredibly well done. And I think that that is quickly defining, like it's a new facet of Cyberpunk Red that I'm really appreciative of, is that you have all of that and the game is still, like I could be running the game like I did back in 2020 and it would still hold together today. It'd be a lot more to track today because like we have new systems, like the investigation system, like some of the achievement stuff, some of the stuff we got in Secretary Power. Like there's a lot of stuff that if you want to make it part of your game now, like you have a lot more options for like optional rule sets than we did back in 2020. But we can manage that, I think, in a way that keeps the game very fun. And it doesn't really ever detract from the core of the game that we're playing. And I know there are some games that cannot claim the same when they get to their 5-year anniversary of like a new edition or something like that, where you end up with like a meta develops, and all of a sudden, like, I think the only meta that Red can be accused of having developed is the evasion tanking, like the 8 reflex, base 14
martial arts.
Yeah, base 14 evasion. I wouldn't even say linear frame martial arts is that problematic a build. It's mostly the bullet dodging. Like, bullet dodging.
Oh, yeah.
And bullet dodging is only mildly problematic. Again, this is things where, like, you exist on the edges. If you are playing a character that can dodge bullets, you are not really a huge problem. It's a different, like, we need tools that better deal with that outside of, like, ambushes and things like that. Because I've talked
to put a better challenge on the field for them.
Right, exactly. Without it feeling unfair for the rest of the party. That's, I think, the biggest thing that I want to throw out there as a like commentary would be that, like, right now the only answers we really have to that player that can dodge bullets are things that they can't interact with. Case in point, ambushes, or things that would overrun the rest of the party pretty crazy amounts. Unless they're also built a similar way, in which case you're just playing a hardened campaign. And even that doesn't always stop it. So it's kind of like, there's this discussion we could have about, you know, where the right line of that is. But that is the only meta, quote unquote, problem that Cyberpunk Red even kinda has after 5 years. So let's talk about the next thing, because this is something you brought up and what drew you to the game, Diamond, that I only understood it a little later, but it is like go ahead.
I did see one thing from Red. She had mentioned something from a stream of mine where I think I remember what we were talking about. I think it was during one of the salvage streams I was doing about the rule of cool. That I have found, it's more just a side note, with Cyberpunk Red, the rule of cool does not have to be exponentially fantastical in order to still be really good for the game, where it's a situation of, okay, roll, we'll see by what degree you succeed, or like, and I've done that from time to time, like on Red Genesis, Black Spark, where we do stuff like that, where it's like, okay, let's see how well you succeed, or it's very difficult, but I will allow for you to try, kind of situations. Right. But that was kind of just something I wanted to brush on, where rule of cool does not need to be world changing. No, as you were saying.
But no, I think I want to talk about the economics, but I guess throw my 2 cents at that side of the discussion briefly. Rule of cool is really, really important, I feel like, for Red. And this honestly, actually, this is probably even better than the economics, because, like, economics are great. Like, this is one of those things that sets Cyberpunk Red apart. But I think the rule of cool in Red, honestly, is actually one of its best qualities. And it's part of why I say, like, everything we do in this game feels cinematic as hell. It's because you can attempt the thing that is, like, nearly impossible. One of the, like, wildest things that I've ever seen in the game is not something I did. It's something that Connor actually pulled off in one of our Jumpstart Kit games. Because we did have the DV scaling system, which was, I think, by and large unchanged to the core release of the game. And so we are on an AV, right? Our group is on an AV, heading out to a cargo ship. And for those of you who think this premise already sounds a little familiar, I learned not too long after we completed this gig that it was borrowed in the punk sense of the word borrowed from Mike Pondsmith's game that he ran with Team Monster back in those days. So we're flying out to this cargo ship in an AV, and as we get near the ship, cargo hooks are fired off the deck of the ship, and one of them lands in one of our AV's jet engines, and it just starts dragging us down toward the ocean, where we'll probably either get seriously injured or die if we hit the ground. And so the only solution to this problem is for one of us to try and go out and either shoot or cut the chain. And I think a couple of us tried shooting it to no avail because it's like thick metal links. And then Connor decided, fuck it, I'm going outside. I'm going to swing. I've got like a grapple hook. I'm going to swing out from the wing and slice at this chain to try and break it so that we don't crash into the ocean. And Evan told him, like, this is a DV-29. Like, this is a nearly impossible check because of all of the conditions. You're in the middle of flight. It's the middle of a storm. Like, this thing is flying downward. There's all the forces associated with that. Like, this is going to be a legendary feat. And then he did it. He rolled like a 31 or something like that on the check. Like, just maxed his check at the perfect moment and just cuts the chain link. And it was just so fucking cool. Like, and you don't get that in a lot of games where, like, someone tells you this is the near impossible odds you're up against, try it. And, like, just go. Like, it's so fascinating. And so, like, Rule of Cool won't be world changing, but it will, like, when you get a Rule of Cool moment that just works like that, it is cinematic in a way that is so difficult to get with other games just because of how much there is in terms of stakes built up on that decision or that line of action that you are now taking to, like, solve the problem in that really, like, dynamic way. It's just unlike anything else. And I've gotten feedback from players I've had before on what I think of as relatively mundane, like, scream sheets. Like, there's one that some of you in our audience may have played through before, or if you're GMs, you may have run. And I can't remember. I think it's in the core rulebook. It's not the core rulebook. It's the data pack. I always got the scream sheets, witches and witch mixed up. But it's called Cargo Race. It is very, the concept is incredibly simple. That's
Jumpstart Kit.
No, it's not. Not the one.
No, I'm thinking of a different. That's Precious Cargo. I'm thinking.
You're thinking
of,
yeah.
Mind.
Yeah, I was like, it's
Cargo Race. That is data pack. That's the scramble between Nomads, Militech, and you, right?
Right. So there's a downed Delta Jack that is coming down over the Badlands, and, like, you and your crew are tasked with going out, retrieving the cargo, and bringing it back. And so in the midst, you're third partying this, essentially, when you get there. And so it's very, like, tense, because there's a lot of interaction that you can have happen there. There's a very clean way to solve the gig if you're skilled enough at social combat, but it's, like, really, really tense the whole way through. It is corporations and the regular people, and, like, something extremely valuable set between you, all happening at once. It's really, really, really interesting to watch how players solve for that. And I think of it as a relatively mundane gig just because it's very, like, one note in a lot of the ways that I normally care about when I'm running gigs. However, when you get to the thing and you start seeing how all these layered things start playing out, even if it's an incredibly simple gig on the surface, there are so many opportunities for deeply cinematic moments that happen in that one of my players at, this was during my boot camp nearly 2 years ago now, which is wild to think about, where one of my players decided that they were going to go and they were going to like, be very guns blazing about it. And they even told me later on, because they were playing a Netrunner, but so I gave them a turret in the back of one of the cars that they could control with their net running skills. And they told me afterward, they're like, I felt like I was in an action movie the whole time. And this is in an adventure where, for everyone's understanding, there are no hard nets designed in that adventure. There's nothing specifically for a netrunner to do unless you build it for them as a GM. And yet, with the like very minor few things I added in there for a netrunner to do, the netrunner was having like probably some of the most fun at the table. It was so cool to see that play out. So yeah, Rule of Cool could absolutely just like season the game in a way that like takes someone from feeling useless and makes them feel useful. And that is always something I go after. So with that all said, to go back to economy now briefly. Obviously we have economies in other games. I will say so few other games have a well-defined economy as Cyberpunk does. And this was kind of where Evan started talking about this is why Cyberpunk is such a unique game. It is simulationist, not only in the way that its world is designed and defined, but in the way that like economic transactions and the economic reality of the world and Night City in particular are really, really well put together, and very much like once you understand how that system is supposed to operate, like from fixers to supply demand stuff to the way that things are like upcharged, like especially if you're playing a later 20 somethings campaign with the CMK rules, like once you understand how all those economic factors kind of blend together and exist together, you feel more immersed in that world than I would say any other RPG world that I've ever played in, because no other RPG that I've ever played has an economy where it really describes, here's what you have easy access to, here's the stuff that you need to like work harder to get access to, outside of like the very nebulous labels of things like wondrous items in D&D. Or artifact items in Fabula Ultima. Like, they exist, they're there, but like, you're never really told, here's what this is supposed to look like for you and your players. It's just left to you, the GM, to determine how rare or not each of those things are. And Cyberpunk Red very much defines it as like, if you know a relatively competent fixer or tech, the odds of you being able to get stuff that's worth about 500 eddies is not difficult, right? Like you know the right people then, and their access can become yours. Sometimes for a fee, but you will have access to those things. Anything 1,000 or greater, you are in the weeds now, and it starts getting difficult, and you have to like really figure out what you're going to do about that problem if you want an item that costs that much. It stratifies that progression model in a way that so few other RPGs do meaningfully well, I believe. Red says, I always feel fixers try to pull for 10% on expensive or higher items until the crew has obtained a great rep with them. So yeah, a lot of them do. Even like at my table, a lot of the players at my pro games do that. And my party is pretty accepting of it most of the time. There have been a couple instances where it's been less of a friendly thing, and it's kind of like, why are you being an asshole about this? And we have to have one of those session zero esque discussions of like, how do we want to deal with that? But once the players start operating more as a team, honestly, it's a pretty good barometer for where people feel their characters are at with relation to each other. Because if the fixer feels like they know their team well and they want the team to succeed, and for them the lost profit of that 10% is worth, because they know that means that's one more tool they have at their back helping them. The moment that that's become the understanding and the fixer's willing to buy in on that, the party is really established as a group and not just as a bunch of single edge runners that have decided to work together for convenience or for like the mutual benefit of it. That, I think, more than anything is where I look at that side of the game and feel like, wow, that's like really, really cool that you have this inbuilt way of being able to like define how well the players feel they relate to one another and how powerful those ties really are. And I feel like the scarcity does a really good job of reinforcing the dynamic of, hey, if you don't work together, your odds of survival are drastically reduced because you'll have less good equipment than the guys who can afford it. You'll have less resources than the people who can afford it. You'll have access to fewer places than the people who have established themselves really well. And so, like, if you work together, these things come easier and they come quicker, and you can all benefit from it mutualistically. And I feel as though because the game doesn't have a lot of hard, fast synergies like games such as D&D have, that's where you kind of get that feeling of a party that is cooperating, is when you get those sorts of things lining up and the behavior of the party starts leaning towards, this is an us problem, not a you, me, or the other guy problem. That's really, I think, what makes it such a intoxicating game loop, and why, like, this is where I keep coming back to it. One more thing for Red. So ask Rex Royale for a fancy new Kendachi. Absolutely 10% Chumba. However, maybe the Freemans might be willing to cut a deal after time doing gigs with them. Absolutely. Because if your fixer, even NPC fixers this applies to, just like you just pointed out, if you've built a rep with someone, they're willing to do biz with you at face value for the benefit of that relationship. Like, because the reality is, people like the Freemans in that example are probably picking the item up 10% cheaper. So they are getting a profit. They're just getting half as much as they normally are used to getting, because they're buying it at the discount and then selling it at face value, rather than buying it at a discount and selling at a profit, like a hard profit, a markup. So yeah, they can get their cut both ways or one way or the other. Yeah, it's really up to them. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Finish your thought.
Well, I was gonna shift over to one last little facet I wanted to address really quickly, but
okay, yeah. All right, because I did see earlier in the chat where Red was talking about, you know, the love of scarcity, which for me the love of scarcity being in here, it's kind of why I prefer the time of the Red over, you know, the 20s or the 70s, because like there is a cost to losing gear.
Yes.
Especially if you're playing with breaking your stuff. Say you have that fancy little Militech, say you have that fancy Militech dragon, and you take a pretty nasty fall, and then suddenly you've smashed your gun. You now need to go find a tech who will be able to fix that and fix it well. And that takes time. Like, you are either paying in time, money, or resources, no matter what. And also the fact that you use the Black Friday rules that we had, and it exacerbates the limited supply versus massive demands, which honestly, I need to do that more in my games, where it's just like, oh yeah, it's gonna be at this night market. Hey, the last one's been sold. Sorry, bud. I do think that, like, Cyberpunk is a game where it's either, yeah, you could be disappointed all the time because you were just a little too slow, or you go take what's rightfully yours, is an approach you can have to things. Sure, it'll get you a rep.
Yeah.
I mean, people will probably hand things over instead of trying to deal with you.
Well, and I feel as though some of that also comes down to being a good GM in knowing how to pace that sort of scarcity into your game and not always fucking your players over. Because I know that, like, Evan misunderstood fundamentally how that scarcity was supposed to look at one point, And there was like a good 5 or 6 sessions we played where Connor was trying to get, because he was playing a Netrunner at the time, he was trying desperately to get really basic programs, and Evan wasn't giving them to him. And he's like, dude, like, I need these programs. They're like 50 to 100 eddies each. Like, they're not expensive. I should have access. And I was trying to explain to Evan, like, yeah, this is how the scarcity is supposed to work. And then when I finally got through to him, he's like, oh shit, and like totally misread it, totally misunderstood it, and was being too conservative about how scarce things were. And like I had to like open him up to no, you should always have access to that level of programs. He knows someone who can get him those level of programs. Like that's the regular boosters, defenders, that kind of stuff should never be a problem. It's when you get into black ice that is particularly sophisticated. That's where the scarcity economics of net running really kick in.
Yeah, go talk to 3-piece.
Yeah. So, yeah, the NPC walking in with the 1,000 eddy gun, you're sold. Fuck the 1,000 eddy gun. What about the 5,000 eddy gun, the Perseus? Like, yeah, there's some things that you're willing to, whenever you can pose the question to your players, how compromised are you willing to take your morals? Like that's a great time. But so yeah, the last thing I really want to discuss before, because I know we're coming up on time. We may have already passed time, but this was I think the thing that really struck me. Connor has GM'd quite a bit in the last couple of years now, like the last year and a half, I'd say, playing games with us like Witcher. He's currently been my GM for Daggerheart. He's GM'd a little bit of Red here and there. Like he ran, when we all went to RenCon down in Tucson, he ran Cyberpunk there, as well as Daggerheart. And he said, I think the reason why, because we all have commented like, Connor, you're killing it as a GM. Like, despite not having as much experience as like myself or his brother, you're killing it. And he's like, I think that the thing I can credit the most with why that is though, isn't because like I'm surrounded by other GMs in my play groups, which like all of us are blessed to have that. Where like anytime we sit down to play, it's literally like I GM, Evan GMs, Connor GMs, their brother Logan GMs. I think the only player that we sometimes have at our table that hasn't GM'd before in like my local play group that's been around for a while is like my brother and then our friend Erica. Like those are the only people who have not GM'd a lot, if at all, right? Like my brother I don't think has ever GM'd. Or he dabbled in it one time. But like he says the only the reason isn't so much that I'm surrounded by a ton of GMs who are admittedly very, very like well put together, his words, not mine, not trying to gas myself up with that comment, is because Cyberpunk Red forces you in a lot of ways as a player, in a really good way, to think about the world as deeply and involved as if you were going to GM the world. Because the moment you step into your character's shoes, you need to have a nearly identical understanding of the world and the way that it works as a game master would. And the only things you're really learning how to manage when it comes to being a game master instead of being a player is the stuff to do with encounter balance and like timing and pacing of skill checks. But like even knowing like how hard or easy something should be, you kind of already get the feel for it as a player because so many of the checks in Cyberpunk are transparent. By which I mean like you, the player, are going to know how difficult that check is to the number because it's either based on a range table where you're firing your gun, or it's in a net run where you're like, you know, the breakpoints along that line, so you can like think very easily about how easy or difficult something is about to be based on how well your check popped up. And so you start to figure things out very quickly that way. And so Connor was saying I credit like Cyberpunk to a lot of that. because it forces you to learn the way a world works. And once you're exposed to that style of thinking, you're like 3/4 of the way to a GM already. Because that last quarter is all of the encounter stuff and like timing certain things. And it's the storytelling of it that like really isn't as defined in the game rules. It's just stuff that you kind of like study and then like refine through practice and that sort of thing. It's very much like you learn it by doing it. So yeah. So quickly before we I suppose before we end this side of the episode, Diamond, did you have any additional thoughts before I look at chat one last time here?
One of the other notes about what makes Cyberpunk different for me as well is the fact that, and this may just be more because of the devs, the game does not just sit and stagnate. Like, these guys go back and they will refine things that they found were not good. There is errata that comes out. They learn from their mistakes, and I like that compared to some other companies where I've seen they only use the same formula.
Right.
Like, after, like, everyone will admit that the core rulebook's layout left much to be desired, but they learned their lesson.
Yeah.
Black Chrome was fantastic. Now, Street Stories and Hope Reborn, those are like, Street Stories is a bunch of individual stories all in one book. And Hope Reborn is a chronological story with a fantastic plot. Like, the way they've written out the plot leaves, like, there's enough of a roller coaster, so that way it doesn't get boring.
Well, and I would say even between those books, the way they formatted Hope Reborn compared to how they formatted some of the information in Street Stories was like
it was
done
phenomenal.
Way, I would say better only from the standpoint that like they were way more intentional about I think of like NPCs that weren't as important and the way that they kind of categorized them by
cards.
Giving them like a little mook card rather than like a full block like they would other enemies, and by doing that they kind of
ganger kind of shit. Yeah.
Well, yeah, like there's a whole host of examples in there, but like in Street Stories there's a lot of them that they give the full block to that like just aren't as important and therefore don't need that level of like specificity.
And like Black Chrome, like you can say a little about Black Chrome and Danger Gal Dossier. Both of them serve very different purposes, but Black Chrome versus like some of the early Gear DLCs really did a good job of laying out the rules and specifications in a very neat order with each piece of gear.
Yeah.
Like, what is it first? What is it treated as? And then what effects does that item have? And they had that formula down, and it has stuck since, and it's done a great job in clarifying how things are done. With Danger Gal Dossier, this versus like books that I've seen that have like books of monsters and other things. They provide enough of a background for each character, and they even apply it in Mixing Drinks, Changing Lives with like characters that have full stat blocks as well. The characters, their stat blocks, and also an explanation on how they built the characters. It's come a long ways on building NPCs in Danger Gal Dossier versus the core rulebook. Yeah, that's one of the things that makes Cyberpunk different. Is they don't look at something like the system always finds better solutions, but doesn't completely throw out the old stuff all the time.
I would say it very often never throws the old stuff out. If anything, it refines it more than anything.
I would say really the only thing would be like, and even then it's not even that far out of date in my opinion, is like old guns never die.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's more there. Even that isn't really truly outdated. It's more because in reality, I would say that's mostly just a patch, right? Where it's like, all right,
It was.
we don't have the time right now when they released that article to go through 2020's back catalog all at once and port forward the items that were there and make them red items, right? Since then, obviously, that was like one of the very earliest DLCs that we got for the game. Since then, now we have Toggle's Temple, which did a lot of that work for us. And
12
then
days of gun miss.
we've had 12 days in general. We've just had like a ton of the 2020 Cyber Generation, even some V3 items, like all ported to Red style of doing things. And like, we're now at the point where a lot of that, we don't need to do it anymore because they've now had the time to do it for us. But like yeah,
you can use something like Toggle's Temple and then look at items from 2020 and be like, yeah, this is probably where the category it would belong in.
Yeah. Need a melee weapon of Toggles. I mean, I would need to go back and see how melee weapons looked in 2020.
Yeah.
But I don't think that there were that many super unique melee weapons, especially when you compare it against the modern iteration of Red and like the full night market index at this point. I feel as though they've actually done a pretty good job of if not porting forward every item, they've definitely done a good job of like making those melee weapons make sense in the new system, to the point that you would need to do very little work, I feel, to get them to feel right. Because the big problem with guns, especially when you look at guns in 2020, was that it was like you had so many very specific, like, this gets XD6 damage plus, and like you'd have weird modifiers and stuff that you have to account for. And a lot of that was just flattened and made simpler now. And it's not, I don't know. I don't think melee weapons ever were as complicated. A lot of them were kind of like they are in Red, where you really got a, like, you get a weapon plus insert fringe benefit of this specific type of melee weapon here. Like either it's also a taser, or it ignores armor, or it, has some kind of second mode, or something, right? Like that was a lot of the, even in 2020, my loose understanding of it was true of that. That are more X-Minor Corporation mass supplements like Cutie Miss. I mean, I think that there's room to just get that over time. Like, I think if you were to make, and I'd be actually really interested to see someone break down a spreadsheet. And I'm curious how much of this, because we still don't know the full scope of NC 2045 in terms of like what it's going to give us outside of just being a setting guide. Because we know based on the 100 Logos DLC that there are plenty of brands within Night City that we've seen very little, if anything, from. And I would be very interested in seeing if somewhere around the NC 2045 release, before or after, somewhere in the middle, we get some of that blank space filled in. Because like there's a lot of opportunity there to get more items for certain manufacturers. But that said, the thing I'd be interested in seeing someone go do is see how many items like that have been created in the game system already do we have from each weapons manufacturer, gadgets from like each, tech manufacturer, like Everest Ventureware or something like that. I'd be curious to see like how much from each brand we have, because I feel like it gets so often lost in the weeds with this game that like our item catalog for Red is as long, if not longer now, than 2020's is.
Yep.
Like we're there. Like, but yeah.
We're a skosh past time.
We're a skosh past time, but yeah.
About 15, but oh well. important stuff has been talked about. So,
It has.
I mean, that being said, Cyberpunk, which I imagine once we get those like 6 like gaming philosophies, we could really start looking into what Cyberpunk pulls from each of them.
Yeah, and that is something I want to discuss in the future, but hopefully this has been at least, even if it is a little rambly, somewhat insightful for people to understand like why I think Red is so different. It is a simulation. It is a grounded world. It is something that is full of consequences, and it is a game that makes the players think and feel like a GM within their own sphere of control, regardless of how freeform of a campaign the GM is running. You will always benefit from thinking one step ahead as a player and learning more about the world and treating the world as a facet to be considered, and treating that the city and the world at large as a character in and of itself. So with that sort of summary of our topics, that is going to be it for this side of the episode. So if you are watching this later on YouTube, you will find a link down in the description that will send you over to Diamond's half of the episode. The second half today, we are going to be talking about some GM self-care and, doing that. So if you are a GM or thinking about GMing the system, especially for those of you who are maybe a little hung up on how dystopic it is, this is probably going to be a good topic for you to have an understanding of and to give a watch and listen to. But for my half of things today, my name is Emmerron.
And I'm Diamond.
And we hope you all have a wonderful morning, evening, or afternoon wherever you're in the world. Stay healthy, stay safe, and until next time, peace.
Bye-bye now.